Today I'll be reviewing the Tamron 20 to 40mm f2.8 lens for the Sony E mount. And you can see here I'm mounting it on my Sony A1, and today I will just share with you my experience and some of the things that I've tested with this lens, how I feel about it, and should you get it. I'm Richard and welcome to Zappy Productions. This is the review of the Tamron 20 to 40mm f2.8 lens. Now this is lens that has, I should say, launched quite recently. I mean, it's launched a few months back, but to me it's still quite recent because lenses that are old are usually a few years old. Now this lens is provided to me by Class Distribution, so I'll thank them for providing me this lens that I can, bring you this particular review here. Now this lens is 20 to 40mm. First I'll talk about the focal range. 20 to 40mm is an interesting range because it depends on who you are. This lens may or may not be something that you should consider. If you come from the era of 24 to 70mm, this is the lens that is probably not for you. 4mm is too close, and this is a f2.8, you don't gain any aperture. So something like a 21.8 in this case, or maybe some even wider zooms are what you want. But this lens will complement people who are using the Tamron zooms, such as the 28 to 75 or 35 to 150. And this lens sits in a very nice range where it's significant difference in terms of the wideness of the lens. This lens is also for people who use mainly primes, and if you just want a very small compact standard zoom, don't want to go the whole 24-70 or 28-75 type of range, this is a good one because normally at the ultra wide end, you don't really need 1.8 or 1.4, and this is the lens that can provide you the ultra wide at f2.8 and still zoom in to a standard view, which is very useful for things like street photography and most standard photos itself. In fact, 40mm is quite a standard focal range. So this lens is ready for those markets that I feel personally will be attracted to it. And if you lie in a market that's not attracted to it, I think this review is still useful for you because this lens has some things to provide. And in fact, the first thing I'll talk about is its size. It is small. Without the hood, this is the same size as a 20mm f1.8 here by Sony. In fact, it weighs the same too, about 400 grams. So it is a very small, light and compact lens. Now, if you use a recent Tamron lens before, this is built to the same quality, which is a nice plastic body, a zoom ring, one of these focusing ring. There is no locking mechanism for the zoom because I think the zoom is very little. The extension is very small, so I think they didn't even bother to lock it. This is a friction-based hood, which I don't quite prefer. I prefer the type that uses the button to lock and unlock, but it's okay. It's okay, not a big deal. And pretty much this is the package. Now this lens, I believe, is weather sealed. If it's not, I'll put down in the link below or something. I believe it's weather sealed, but I still prefer to put something like a filter on it. And this is where I think this lens is still pretty good because it's a 67mm filter thread for a 2.8 lens, 20 to 40. So you can share your filters with something like the 21.8 here or the 35 1.4 if you're a Sony user, and you can put a filter on this lens and utilize it, be it ND or be it circular polarizer, up to you. So overall, I think that for 400 grams, this is an awesome lens for traveling at least. And then next, let's talk about the autofocus. Now with the A1, it is very quick, but a lens of this class, 20 to 40mm, really, there is not much to move to start with. So I won't go too in-depth, but I'll tell you that it's quick and it's accurate in the field. Whatever problem it is the standard Sony issues that I face for portraiture, so I shall not go too in-depth into this for the review. But if not, if you point at something, it does focus very nicely with continuous AF and very quickly too. Now when it comes to image stabilization, which I want to spend a bit more time because this is a lens probably meant for people who travel, and because it's an f2.8, people may use it for night photography too. And I would say as for IS-wise image stabilization, this lens have no built-in VC, no built-in image stabilization, so it uses whatever that is available in the Sony body. And for the Sony A1 at least, at 1/5 of a shutter, it isn't that great. It misses 60% of the shot, or should I say it hits 40% of the shots. And if you use 1/8, 2/3 stops faster in shutter speed, 2/3 stop less in exposure, this lens performs a lot better. Around 90+%, 80 to 90% hit rate. So why is it this way. Most likely is that the Sony body isn't that optimized for ultra wide angles. And I noticed this result applies for both the 20mm and 40mm. So as long as you shoot like 1/8 of a shutter, this lens provides a good 80-90% hit rate. That is fantastic, really fantastic. Now that is it for image stabilization. So now let's talk about the actual image quality itself. So there's a two-part. One is the standard test that I do usually for outside the window and talk about sharpness and stuff. And the other one is the portrait test itself. So let's first talk about the standard test. Firstly, this lens at 20mm is very sharp in the center, that stopping down probably don't provide any more sharpness in the center itself. Then it gradually loses sharpness and goes further and further away from the center itself. I'll say it's generally the sharpness for the center and 1/3 the frame, like you can see my hands here, 1/3 the frame, is pretty good. But the sharpness at the edge of the frame, like this way and this way, not so great. So that's something to note. At least for 20mm, this is how I feel. Center is very sharp. Center here. The sharpness here is also very good. The sharpness here, not so much. At 40mm, I did notice that even at 2.8, there is some slight hazing. Now, you may not notice it. Depends on whether you shoot at 100% or you view at 200%, and depends on are you using a Full HD, Quad HD monitor, and what's not. It really depends. Your 100% is not the same as my 100%, right? So at my 100%, I notice a slight hazing, but at 200%, you can really see it. But your 100%, if you're using a 4K monitor, you may not notice it. And if you're using a 2K monitor, you may notice more hazing than me. But there is some slight hazing at f2.8. And then the sharpness do fall off a bit quicker. So if you follow my hand here, it's sharp here. Still sharp here and usable, but it falls off really quickly to the side. I can show you some of the photos I shoot out of my windows, and I can show you the various regions. Exactly the same, sharp in the center, less sharp once you move off center, and really quite soft at the side. In both cases, 20mm and 40mm, if you stop down, it does improve significantly. But that said, why is the case where the softness keep moving, I'll say it's getting worse as you move to the side? Is it a case where the lens is not flat? What I mean by flat is that a lens, you can see this is like an angle. Lenses for cameras are usually designed to be focused on a plane, right? But it's not that simple. It requires quite a bit of correction to do that. So some lenses do retain a little bit of distortion, or should I say its original characteristics, which is focusing on the curve of the angle itself. So in this case, this lens, the sharp in the center is not the same as sharp at the side. In fact, let me show you some photos where I focus at the side, and you will notice that if I focus at the side is sharp, but the center not as much. So what it means is that this lens is not a flat focus plane, but a slightly curved one. As such, when you stop down, as the depth of field increases, it does cover the planes that were once not in focus. So there's something to note with this lens. Next, I'll talk about aberration. Now at 20mm, I notice some aberrations, especially at the black building at the side, and there's some red tinge there. At 40mm, I don't notice any significant aberration. I mean, if you look very closely, I think there's some slight yellow tinging, but it's a small one. So something to note on the aberration side. It is not very obvious. You probably won't notice it unless you look for it. But if you do see it, just note that it is very well controlled versus many of the older zoom lens that ever existed. I mean, this is on par with most modern zoom lens that I've tested so far. Then we look at Sunstars. Why I look at Sunstars is because this is a lens that most likely people use it for travel, so you may stop down a little bit more to just shoot landscapes. And the Sunstars look like that. I do not know whether it's a good Sunstar or a bad Sunstar. That's for you to gauge. And lastly, I look at coma, which is the distortion of the lights at the edge of the frame due to some sort of aberrations. And you can see that there is some coma where there is a tail to those lights at the edge of the frame for this lens. So this lens, if you are intending to use it for astrophotography or anything along those lines, just note that stars at the side aren't going to be perfect. So that is it for the standard type of test that I usually tend to do. Now let's talk about real-world portraiture. Now this lens, as I said earlier, this is not a flat focusing lens. Most likely it is a slight curvature in the lens focusing itself. What it means is that for portraiture, as long as you focus on the eye, on where it should be in the frame. So if you put a human face here, you focus on eye here, you put a human face here, focus on eye. Don't do the focus and recompose. This lens is perfectly good. It is sharp for purpose of portrait. I've used it and you'll be wondering, what the heck am I using a 20 to 40 millimeters for portrait for? Well, you want to distort the legs, it's a good idea. I mean, if you put the person's body in the center and the legs at the side, like this photo here, you can make the person look significantly taller than they should. You can also have a very nice top-down distorted shots, and that is very useful for cosplay. Some people love that kind of feel. I'll just leave it as there. And then you can use it at 40 millimeters, which give quite a standard field of view. And if you're doing half body and wider, it looks pretty okay. It looks pretty standard of a angle itself. Overall, for portraiture, it is very sharp, very responsive, and if there's any issue, it's a standard Sony focusing issues, which you can see in my other videos. But if not, this is a very competent lens, even for portraiture, as long as you love the focal range. If you want the distortion look, you want that long legs, long hand type look, if you stretch it to the side, or you want the top-down, big head look, I think this lens can provide you for portraiture itself. But most importantly, this lens I feel is mainly for people who want to travel, who want to do landscape, then followed by some standard shots. I think this lens works out really well. Now the last section I want to cover is for video. This lens does have focus breathing. You can see that there is some slight in and out at the edge of the frame. Not a very big one, but it is there. Next, when it comes to, is it parfocal? This lens is not parfocal. I noticed that this is probably a very Tamron thing. So when you zoom out, the lens compensates it if you zoom out very quickly. If you zoom out really slowly, you won't notice it. But if you zoom out really quickly, you'll see that the lens tries to compensate the focus as you zoom out. So what I'm guessing is that actually Tamron is doing some nifty stuff inside the lens to compensate for the change of focus as you zoom out, to create this parfocal effect if you are focusing slowly. If you are focusing very quickly, you will notice that it goes out of focus and back in focus. That's something. But that being said, if you do it slowly, it looks almost parfocal. And if you do it quickly, the two ends are in focus. Center is where it goes crazy. So I'll leave it to whether you will enjoy using that kind of lens or not. Pretty sure this lens is not parfocal, but Tamron is using some technologies to make it look like one. And if you are in the market to use something like this and focusing, should I say, zooming really slowly, maybe it's parfocal to you. Overall, how do I feel about this lens? But before we go there, let's look at the price. Now, this is the current price here. It is not very expensive in Singapore, but neither is it very cheap. It is on par with, I would say, it's a little bit on the standard zoom side or some second-hand good standard zooms. So whether you want to buy or not, I will leave it up to you. In US, the price is as such too. I would say it's not really cheap, but it is not really expensive either. So something that you can really consider if you are in the market for it. In conclusion, I think this lens is really for people who are using Tamron lenses, 2.8 to 75, 35 to 150, or people who are using prime lenses but want a zoom for the purpose of travel. I think this is a very good zoom for travel. 20 to 40 really is what I think I want for travel, because the other one I can probably just swap a long lens and get over with. But if not, you have to do the other way, which is to bring a 24-70 and bring a wider lens out of that. That is not very desirable to me, because if I'm a portrait shooter and I want it long, I'll get it long, 85, 135. But that being said, depends on your use case. If you are not in the market for this, you are not in the market for this. If you don't need ultra wide, this is not the lens for you. If you don't care about ultra wide and you are okay to live with 24 to 70, that's the lens for you. This may not be. But for everyone else, if you are in the market to have an ultra wide-ish zoom and then compensate with another lens for a longer focal range, this lens will work out very well. Tamron have did a good job. It is a small, compact lens, no bigger than a 21.8. Optically, it's great. Just know that there's some field curvature. If not, I think the image quality coming out of this lens is something that a lot of people will enjoy using. That's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed this short little review on the Tamron 20 to 40mm f2.8. And if you are interested, do go down to your local shops, visit it. If not, Do subscribe and like and follow my channel. I will do more reviews this year, and hopefully it will be something useful to you to make your decisions. Once again, this is ZP Productions. I'm Richard, and bye-bye.